Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
Final hour of the Situation Room this morning. And even as we talk, sometimes we see things happening before our eyes, but not understanding the method behind that particular madness. So today, we want to delve a little bit further into some of these things. We're looking at a few days ago when certain demolitions took place. Clearing the way, safety versus property rights, as we're talking about this morning. Sylvia Kasanga is the president of the Architects Alliance, and she joins us this morning after a very long time. Good morning.
Good morning, Du.
How are you?
I'm well, thank you.
In what part of this Kenya have you been hiding?
I've been very busy in this very Kenya of ours.
Yes.
There's always something to be done.
But not loudly.
So much work.
Yeah.
Loud enough. Yeah, I guess loud enough. Maybe you have not had me because it's been a while since I was here.
Yes.
Yeah. But I'm glad to be here after so long.
Thank you for coming.
Yes,
It's good to see you.
Yes.
You know, and of course, when you were serving as a senator, people didn't realize the other hats that you wore. And I guess that in these times, then that other plumage then comes out very clearly.
Absolutely.
You know, and we're glad that we can have this conversation with you because we see it, but we very rarely, scrutinize or interrogate a little bit more in terms of what could actually the problem be and how to solve it. So thank you for doing this morning.
Thank you.
Before we do, as you know, our proverbs will need your interpretation.
Today we're in Eritrea, beautiful country. The capital, Asmara, is considered to be the little Rome due to its architecture. But that aside, they fought for 30 years with Ethiopians to gain independence. So that is 1993. But that notwithstanding, if you're planning to visit there anytime soon, just make sure you withdraw and have liquid cash.
You need to have cash.
ATMs don't work there.
Oh, wow.
If it's internet, forget about it. Connectivity is not good.
Yes.
But let's go to the proverb. And this one, it'll be interesting to you. The woman you make sacrifices for can turn around and tell you that she did not force you to, and she would not be wrong.
That brings back matters of mental health. You know, it's Mental Health Month.
Yes, it is.
This month, and I'm hoping you shall do quite a bit of work around mental health. It brings around that because it's about expectations and the complexities of human relations. We see this issue really affecting our teenagers today, the young adults in the universities, where you give love and you expect love back, as if it is supposed to be actually given back. And that complex analogy that you should have no expectation of the other person, which is very difficult for us to grasp in our minds. If I love you, there's an expectation that you will love me back, And yet, wisdom is suggesting that you should not have that expectation. For us who are Christians, you do things for the greater glory of God, right? For the kingdom of God. You're not supposed to expect accolades and, flowers from the human being. If they come, well and good, but you're not supposed to expect them. Your blessings come from the Lord for doing what needs to be done. Love your neighbor as you love yourself. You don't expect your neighbor to love you. You're doing it for the greater glory of God. So it's a mental health issue, this one. And I hope, in fact, you can write that in your social media and send it around to the young people.
The only love that is true is agape love.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
The one that you expect.
Absolutely. That's a good one.
True.
That's a good one.
So do it good, but don't expect it back. Essentially. All right. So there's even as we look at some of the things that have been happening, our minds are cast back to a time when we read the stories of huge homes, property, then being demolished either to make way for infrastructure or to make way for the environment.
Absolutely.
Where houses, homes, property, offices were built on riparian land.
Yes.
We're seeing the same thing and has happened over, decades, and it's happening again.
Yeah.
And so...
Sadly so.
True. Well, okay.
Yeah.
Well, I think that your opinion has come through there. But property has come down in the last few days.
Yes.
And it has been a bit ugly in terms of how it has happened.
Yes.
But when we're saying safety versus property rights this morning, is there a fine line or are the lines very clearly demarcated in terms of if this is an area where one should not be building, then you should not cry the tears when, the authorities bring it down?
And let me take it back a little bit. Last year, we were celebrating 15 years of our constitution, enactment of our Katiba at 15. I think that was the rallying call last year, Katiba at 15. And I did say in one platform that if the Katiba we have today was to, to be judged or to be looked at in a physical form, that which you can touch and see, then it would be the physical spaces in which we exist. That is the true telltale of how we have rolled out our Katiba. Right? How are our physical spaces? How is the town planning? How is our urban planning? How are rural towns? How are the quality of the roads? It's not just about building a road, but how is that quality of the road? How is it serving us? What is the level of cleanliness? And these are the constitutional expectations, the right to clean environment, the fact that urban planning and land use and planning has been devolved to the counties and brought closer to the people. These are the expectations of Katiba at 15 that by now we have resolved and sorted out our physical environment such that it is serving us. I'll tell you today, and I've said this severally, I even said this if you remember, when we were doing our mental health campaigns that time. We take for granted the physical environment that we live in, and we don't realize what impact it has even on our mental wellness. Look at the pedestrian today, especially in these tough economic times. In the morning, you wake up, you see hordes of people walking from, whether it's Kawangware, whether it's, from all those areas, they're walking right across town, maybe to industrial area where their jobs are. And look at how dangerous it is for a pedestrian to just walk through the streets of Nairobi. It's actually a matter of life and death. And imagine the stress within which that person is going to arrive at their place of work. Our physical environment is a complete embodiment of our constitution and the failures that you see happening, including the fact that you have people, building on riparian, yet we have county governments that are the custodians of those land use plans. They're supposed to be enforcing such that we don't see such things happening. It's really a travesty. Now, the work that the Rivers Commission is doing is actually absolutely commendable, because riparian areas are completely protected by law, by a constitution. You're not supposed to build on them. Even if your land title has a riparian going across it, it is not for you to use. The reason being, riparian is used by everyone downstream. You'll hear, people in Makueni complaining about the quality of water. That quality of water starts here in Kirichwa River, that then goes to feed into the Athi River somewhere down the line. So everybody on that riparian has a duty to the human being who's down in Makueni, down all the way, Taita Taveta, all the way downstream. Those people also deserve very clean water. So really, when you're buying land that is that has a riparian around it, there should be that realization that this space is not yours. It is for Kenyans. And the government has a duty to protect that. But how do we find ourselves where we are? Now, let me bring this back again. The reason why, and this one we have tried to analyze hugely when we were discussing Katiba at 15. The reason why we find ourselves in a place where we can look at our physical environment and say, without a doubt, we have not rolled out the constitution accordingly to the expectation of our physical environment, is because a lot of the rolling out that is happening, whether it is at county government or national government, there is a gap where professionals have been left out.
Okay.
Yeah. Professionals have been left out. Ndu and Dennis, my biggest advocacy work that I'm doing today is about the role of the architect. By the time you buy a plot of land, and this one I want all our listeners to hear, yes, your lawyer has done their due diligence, they've done their part and all that stuff. But please, even before you pay your down payment, can you get your architect also to look at that plot of land and tell you, these are the zoning requirements, This is what the bylaw says. Your architect will be able to tell you, actually, this is riparian, the water lines will be marked up to this by Warma, because Warma is the one that marks flood levels, and tell you, actually, you cannot build beyond this. So I keep saying that if you don't involve your architect from the very, very, very early stage of even purchasing your land, you're missing a very significant point.
Yeah, Sylvia, you bring very critical submissions here, because for a very long time, we've looked at individuals who built on the riparian land, and it's been left at ignorance of the law is no defense. You ought to have known. But there is also the flip side of things where I bought land fine, I constructed a building on it, and there were approvals throughout. I even had an architect, right, who supervised through the construction of these projects. So are we saying that there are individuals as well within the space who are letting Kenyans down knowingly? Because if I am to involve an architect from the word go, they would be able to advise me even before I buy that land, because they understand the bylaws, they understand all these things. So are there then individuals within the space as well who are just letting the profession down?
Yeah, bad apples are there. There are bad apples everywhere. And we are not... we don't mince our words at the Architects Alliance to call ourselves out for those who are bad apples and say, you're letting us down. We actually have architects who sell their stamp. So a lot of constructions that are going on here, you find that the person, I don't even know whether there's an architect supervising, but you may find that the person who actually submitted those drawings was not a registered architect. But they sought a stamp from a registered architect, because by law, you cannot submit, only an architect, a registered architect can submit drawings for approval. So we have that gap there, which is something we've really been trying to highlight to Kenyans to understand.
I'm sorry. Only a registered architect can submit drawings for approval.
Yes.
Yeah. This is county across the country.
All counties, 47 counties.
Okay.
Yes.
But we have serious gaps there, because we do have bad apples, which we are calling out. Yeah, we are calling out our regulators also for not pulling out these bad apples or punishing them accordingly. And because of some of the legislative gaps that we have come across now, and we are seeing now, really, this architect who has been given so much responsibility has very little authority also. And we want to change the legislative environment of the architect and create, an act for creation of an institute for architects that can oversee regulation of the practice and the profession as well. Okay. So that we can begin to nib in the butt every, all these bad apples, we can begin to weed them out. And also strengthen the legislative framework such that then the architect can get the commensurate authority when it comes to the amount of responsibility that actually an architect carries. Because really the architect is a custodian of public safety when it comes to the physical buildings.
Yes.
Really, we are the ones who hold that responsibility. But the law does not give us that commensurate authority. I'll tell you right now, even the Physical Planning Act, Physical and Urban Planning Act, that one, there's no express provision that says anyone who wants to develop must, as a matter of must, use a registered architect. It's only implied. And we need to change that, because this is the reason we find ourselves in a lot of
Is it deliberate? Is the lack of clarity then deliberate? Because if you know that something could essentially get somebody in trouble later, the thought then is that from the very beginning, you would be very clear about what the recommendations, not just recommendations, what the requirements are for this process to begin. But if it's ambiguous, how do you then hold that against somebody later?
I wouldn't say it is deliberate. I would just say it was done when it was done. Maybe at that time, architects were not there to, fight and push for it. But here we are now. We are saying now these ambiguous provisions need to be removed, and we have clarity now in line with what we are seeing. Kenyans are having to pay a lot of costs to regularize, to get their property demolished, to make way for flood zones, And it is out of some of these, legislative areas that are not so clear. So that is part of the advocacy work that I've been busy doing right now. We have a lot of work to do around the physical environment.
Okay, so help us understand something. When a building is erected, it doesn't matter whether it's a commercial building or whether it is a personal building, somebody's home, estate, whatever, there needs to be approval, isn't it?
Absolutely.
So somebody is looking through everything that you have and then is telling you, and they don't just look at the building and the materials and whomever is on the project, they're looking at the land as well, isn't it?
Yes.
So if somebody builds on riparian land, for example, like the ones we saw that came down the other day, somebody gave approval for that to happen.
Yes. And sometimes when you hear the approving authority talk about it, they'll say, maybe that's not what they approved. I've seen some of such comments by a approving authorities when they come on media, like they come here and they'll say, no, that is not what we approved. But what is being implemented is different. How did it change? Yeah, was there an enforcement that said stop construction? Some, you see, they will say, yes, we have stopped construction, but it still goes on because maybe there's political interference. So there's a lot of issues we're having to grapple with. There's corruption, there's political interference, there's whatnot. But there are times when you have seen actually buildings being brought down. Yeah. We've seen buildings being brought down that have been, you're on riparian, you have to come down. And we see them actually come down. We have seen that happen in this country before. Why others are able to come up and not be brought down is a question of either political interference or corruption, somewhere in the value chain.
So how do you apply balance? Because it provides a case for anybody that will probably hold up in any court of law when it says, how do you apply this to me and then not to another person? Because we all got the approval somewhere down the line, whether you remember that this was riparian land or not, or whether then the thing comes up for you to create space for flood passage and all of that. How does somebody now say, or how do you now create the balance for this person who's gone through unimaginable loss after they finished their house? They've taken pictures, they've sent to everybody. How do you then say, well, it's coming down? Because the blanket destruction of this property is not asking questions. The brutality of this process doesn't stop to ask, who approved? Yes. Let me see the document. Who told you that you can go ahead? Those questions are not asked.
It's interesting, because the failures we are seeing around the physical environment are now manifesting in the fact that we have to go to court for physical. Now courts are the ones who are running the physical environment, unfortunately. So there's been now a lot of jurisprudence around these issues of demolitions and the riparians. And if we are going to fall back first to the law, what does the law say? Or what does jurisprudence say? What have the courts determined? And one of the clear things is that riparian land must be protected. That goes without saying. However your approvals were procured, however, whoever, supervised your work, whether it was on riparian land, that now becomes absolutely secondary. The first thing is that riparian land must be protected. Then the second thing that the courts have been particularly clear about is now how is the regularization going to happen? Yes, we find ourselves in a situation where you've been marked. This is in the riparian. Yes, it was approved, it was everything. There has to be serious consultations that should happen to bring this person into proper awareness that, unfortunately for you, this is a big loss. This one has to go. There are a few other instances where maybe the government is actually trying to acquire some of your land that is in the riparian. That's a different scenario where maybe compensation may be due in such a scenario. So there's the government now, like Nairobi Rivers, when they're doing what they're doing, there has to be absolute clarity and clear communication to the people. Because one fact must remain clear to Kenyans: riparian land has to be protected because it doesn't belong to one person. Secondly, if the government is expanding areas, then that's a different scenario. There has to be a lot of public participation. When you're removing people, like we saw in Gikomba, the kind of, consultations you have to have with Kenyans so that they can understand, actually, we need to move you from here because we need to pass this thing here for a flood zone or whatever. Then there must be very clear communication. So even the courts have been clear about that. They've been clear in how to recover some of these things, where compensation is due, and due process must be followed at all times. So as to whether that is what the government is doing is now the question, is now the issue. But there's no debate as to whether riparian land, must be recovered or not. It must be recovered.
I want to look at, in this entire conversation then, whenever a project is coming up, it's not just the architect that we look at. We have the QCs, we have the engineers, everybody who will make sure that this project comes up. But there is the regulation aspect of it. Who then regulates an architect if under the law, QCs and architects are together? So in the bill that you're talking about, the Architects Bill of 2026 seeks to remove everybody so that everyone is regularized individually. What would that do to save the problem that we see today?
Public safety, So first, the current regulations around the architect, our regulator is the Board of Registration of Architects and Quantity Surveyors. They're called BORACs. We call them BORACs.
Yes.
So they only regulate the architect and the quantity surveyor. The engineers are regulated by the Engineering Board of Kenya, which is a separate body. And then we have other regulators. There's NCA, which regulates contractors. Technologists have KETREB, which, so we have all these regulators in the space, yeah? So for architects, one, we don't need to be regulated together with quantity surveyors. Different levels of responsibility. Again, I say the architect has a sole responsibility towards public safety by nature of the profession and the technicality of the profession. Now, to answer your question, what does this bill do to bring now the safety that then we don't see? Number one, we want to, I don't like to use the word self-regulation, but it is more like a peer-to-peer sort of thing. Dennis, you're an architect, I'm an architect, right? You're doing the wrong thing. You come before a panel of your fellow architects to punish you or to discipline you or to, like what LSK does, right? It has absolutely a lot more impact. Then the penalties that are attached to one who has been declared that you have made a mistake here are high, punitive enough. Yeah, you'll see something like 5 million even for selling your stamp, because it's the worst thing you can do. That's how you expose human beings. That's how you expose Kenyans, to lack of safety, because you're selling your stamp. The very authority that you have been given to secure Kenyans, you can dish it out with very little money, of 50,000. I tell you, they sell their stamps for very little money. 100,000, 50,000, and maybe what is coming up is a 2 billion worth of a project that is coming up. It's a really wrong thing to do. So there's that aspect where we bring in the peer-to-peer sort of regulating one another, checking one another, having checkers, having whistleblowers, having all those things. But more importantly is looking inwardly as well. More capacity building, bringing ourselves to present requirements of what an architect is required to be in this day and age. And also in full recognition that we have very many young architects who are coming on board. A talk we had just the other day, UNESCO and other global statistics will say that, for a population of, to serve a population properly, you need one architect for, say, 1,000 citizens.
Okay.
Right? So this is roughly the statistics. But in Kenya today, where we have a population of about 55 million, you find that one architect is serving between 35,000 to 45,000 Kenyans. So we are really, not training enough architects, because technically there is no structure that should come up without the involvement of an architect. And I mean any structure, even in the rural areas, we underestimate the fact that even if it is a madhouse,
yes,
it can be properly designed and supervised within the capacity of that person using an architect.
Why do you think people are not engaging the expertise of architects, regardless of the structure that's being put up, regardless of where?
There's no express requirement by law. There's no express requirement anywhere by law. And that's why people are able to go around us. Then there's also that mentality that we are elitists. There's a mentality that architects, elitists, we belong only to serve the middle class. That is completely unfortunate. No, we are not expensive. You see, that's not what they say. They say, architects are expensive, we can't. No, we price based on the project. There's no expense there. You're pricing for the project based on the project. So there's no expense there. It's expertise that you're bringing in, right? But this mentality, Kenyans, we need to remove this mentality. The reason why our cities, our towns, our rural areas are looking the way they look is because there's no expertise. It's because Kenyans, it's become a free-for-all sort of market, which we need to capture in the spirit of our constitution to bring it back into some sanity, to bring back some sanity. You drive here Mlolongo, it's a nightmare. Look at Pipeline, it's a nightmare. I want to assure you that most of those did not have a registered, trained architect who worked on all those structures. Yeah. The other day you had an NCA relied, I think, on a report that was done by the National Building Inspectorate that was suggesting that 85.
Over 80%.
Over 80% of buildings that they inspected, I think 23,000 buildings that they had inspected were not fit. Again, I want to assure you, a trained architect of capacity, even for our own reputation, it is in my interest to see something done from the beginning to the very end until we hand over the keys that is done properly. I just don't design. I supervise. I manage the contract. That is the training. And that is why the responsibility is heavy on an architect. Yeah? But you'll find Kenyans, we are going round architects in the pretext that we are expensive. And that is not true. We are training. It's very expensive to train an architect in Kenya today. We have 5 universities training Kenyans. Can we really make use of them? Yeah. We have now almost 500 architects coming out of university every day. We need to absorb them. We need to use their expertise, and we need to change our physical environment and change that mentality. The other thing that the Act is going to change, it's been a bit contentious because at the moment, under the current Act, there's a prescription of what our fees should be, which I think is what deters a lot of Kenyans. Yeah, because it's a fixed fee. And
it's a percentage of the cost of something,
it's
isn't
a percentage, yes.
Okay.
I'm not sure how these percentages were arrived at. But we look at how lawyers do what they do with their remuneration orders that then are published almost on an annual basis, and we say maybe this is the direction we need to take, rather than straitjacketing ourselves into a space that you cannot maneuver based on the current situation in the country. Maybe this is the direction we need to take so that we can be also more accommodating to Kenyans, and we can get commensurate compensation for the work that we do, the different levels of work we do. Those who are working in the rural areas, those who are working in the cities, there's commensurate, pay and services that are then given to Kenyans. So there's that aspect also that we are looking at critically that needs to change and align with the modern times.
So I want to bring you to conversations around city planning or even estate planning. And I want to pick your brain on how Nairobi is supposed to look like if we used registered architects to help in planning the city. You just mentioned about pipeline, and with where we sit today, many are saying even the Kilimanis of today are just turning out to be bougie pipelines because of what is happening.
Absolutely.
So what does an architect bring on the table when it comes to planning a city that is modern and that serves everybody? Because remember, we're talking about safety. You walk in some estates today, in Eastleigh, you would walk, and we've heard of stories of individuals who've been hit by rocks that are coming from buildings up top. What does an architect bring to having areas where we live to be safe, to be sustainable for the future?
And beautiful and good for our mental health. As we have seen in other cities. We've seen lots of cities, beautiful cities. Now, first, let me just say that architects, we don't work on our own. Of course, we don't work alone. We don't work in a silo. We work with teams. We work with other professionals, right? So we are clear about that. When it comes to physical planning, and this I need to say it very carefully because I don't want my fellow planners who we work very closely with to get offended. But the architect brings the third dimension. What we are taught in school is a third dimension. A lot of planning is a two-dimensional. You're looking at X and Y. If you remember your X and Y. Yeah. So then the architect comes with a Z that goes up. So when you sit down to city plan, planners must have an architect who brings that third dimension. Yes, we are saying, let us zone in this way. But the architect will come and say, in terms of 3D, what will this look like? Here they'll be high, these ones will be low, this will be too tight, we need wider. Those conversations then can happen. There are cities that are built by professionals who are both urban planners and architects, because that happens. There's an aspect of urban planning as we go through architecture school. And there are those who finish their first degree and then they go and major in urban planning. So you find that they have a hybrid of both. And they make very good city designers and planners because now they have that aspect of the 2D and the 3D. Like you'll see in Singapore, for instance, some of the people who designed cities like Singapore, Paris, beautiful Paris, you'll find an architect who has that urban planning. So the two must come together. You cannot just design on the two dimension. You have to look at the third dimension. That's why we end up with places like Mulolongo, because all you have is plots. Yeah? The planner has done his part. It is just plots. But when those plots were being, what we say, katwa, yeah? Was there somebody to look at what is the impact in the third dimension if we say we are going to kata and these are all urban plots? So everyone will come and put up a tower. What will that look like? Right? Then you have to bring in environmentalists and others. This has to be a full team. It can never be one person. You have to bring a full team. Look at planning, say, around Mavoko area in Machakos, where you find an industry sitting right next to an estate, where there are children growing up, their mothers growing up. You have an industry that is, bellowing black smoke at night, and right next to it, there's an estate. How do we come into this, into this situation? Again, I'll tell you, because part of our work as architects is to also analyze users. Usability. Those are areas we can sit and say, no, this cannot happen. There has to be a buffer in here, and we debate about it. So the architect's contribution is very significant when it comes to city planning. Absolutely significant, yes. Mostly the third dimension part of it.
So
is what,
when you look at, closet areas of a metropolis, so you have the city itself, and then, of course, you have the closet areas. Nairobi, very clear what you have. Nairobi, you're looking at Syokimau, Mlolongo, you're looking at Ruiru, you're looking at Kiserian, Ngong, right? And they're still mushrooming. But it would seem as though you need it. Even Nairobi itself, the planners have told us that if it had followed the plan, then perhaps Nairobi would not be looking the way it's looking today. So how do you say that you're planning for cities, even future cities, if you're not even following the original plan? And then to take into consideration populations that are growing. It doesn't matter what you say, they will grow. And that the growth of the population has to be followed by a proper planning, because Absolutely. What are you going to do? Here we have sanitation issues with lack of sewage, not improper sewage, lack of sewage. There are people who had to put up, they didn't care, they just wanted sewage. Here in Kitengela, 40 million shillings, they put it together by themselves. Others in other places, they're putting up homes, they don't know what the plan is for sewage, but they know that they need to, what are those things called? Biodigesters. They're all over the place. Yes. People are just putting up things for themselves. Yes. So the question is here, how do you develop properly? Here we are saying you need an architect, you need a planner, you need an environmentalist. The person who gets there 50 by 50, or is it that 80 by 40, whatever it is today, is not thinking about those professionals to come and sort the thing out for themselves. They're thinking, I am not paying rent another day in this place. I have my plot. I have the guy who can build. I have to move out. Even if we'll build one room, we move, then we continue building later. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely.
They are not thinking. There's no rule.
Yeah.
Right now, there's no rule. The rule come into play when now this beautiful structure has been put up and they say, all right, hello, Mr. Man, thank you very much. Songa kidogo, tomorrow is coming down. You see what I'm saying? The rules apply after the fact. But like you said, you've given examples to other developed areas whereby before you lay one brick, this is what we are going to do. This is the person that you must bring in to help you. Why is it difficult to have the reverse enacted?
Dan, we ask ourselves that question a lot, even in our own spaces. You see, Konza City is really a model where the government must first go in and lay all the infrastructure, put down the roads, put down the sewer lines, put down this. You've already designed it, it will hold a population of X. So you design around that. You zone it properly. You say schools will be on this side, housing will be on this side, whatever will be on this side. Proper planning, right? Make sure all the infrastructure is in. Anyone coming in, you're coming literally to plug and play because the infrastructure is there. That is how ideally things should happen. But many times in our country, the amenities and the infrastructure follow Kenyans when they've already settled. That's what you're saying. They follow Kenyans when they've already settled, which is really unfortunate. And this needs to change. And this is truly a failure of planning. And the fact that we are not really planning for for the future. You're right about that. We are not planning adequately for the future. Now, we have messed up. We have not followed the plans that were laid before 2014. New plan was not followed. There are no plans that have been done. Now is when the county is running ahead to try and do the local development plans. I think you're aware now, Westlands, I don't know where else they're starting to do. Okay. Because I'm an optimist, I'll say it's never too late. Now we have to regularize, work around what we have, and see how best then can we make the city livable. What changes must come without hurting people and their developments? It's a very tough question to ask. What kind of investment then does the government have to do to make sure it is servicing the current developments that are there? Clearly, you cannot stop a city from developing. It looks like you can't really stop. And even the jurisprudence today, the courts are now saying, no, we are not going to stop that development. You know, residents' associations are going to court and saying, you need to stop this development. We won't get light, it's hurting us. And the courts are saying, no. And the court is even going as far as determining, instead of 21 levels, you build 17 levels or something like that. Right? Now we are seeing it's happening. Up until the appeal court is saying, no, you know, you're not giving us enough reasons as to why we should stop this development. So development is going to happen whether we like it or not. What now the governments should be telling us, what Nairobi County should be telling us, and all the other county governments, is then what are you going to do to make sure you're going to service all this population that is now here? We are densifying very rapidly. How are you going to service these buildings that are going to come? How are we going to install new sewer lines? Does it mean then we get specialized technology that will come and bore in the ground, underground completely? Is it time now even to think about underground railway lines for moving people around? I think even the other modern cities had to reach that place where they say it's time to get our act correct. So it's never too late.
I hear what you're saying. But the problem is that even if it's never too late, where is the consciousness? And if we saw it, it would play out in the different departments that then are mandated to do certain things. Where is the consciousness that these things will happen? It's not a matter of will they happen, will people have more children, will people then have a better economic outlook, will then they be able to move? It's not a matter of if it'll happen. It will happen.
It is happening.
The person who is living in a 3-bedroom apartment today has not always done that. The person who's living in a mansion tomorrow has not always done that.
Correct.
They have progressed.
Absolutely.
But I'll give you an example. The flood, the rain came. As a result of that, there was flooding. Tell me why that a swamp area that begins not at the airport, that begins probably all the way down from Nairobi River, coming in from Kariokor, stretches all the way well into Mlolongo swampland. You should not build on swampland. But we have apartments untold all the way from after the airport through towards the end of Mlolongo. The rain came, people were swimming, and it was not a swimming pool.
Absolutely.
But guess what? The rain has gone, it is now dry, and then we forget about it.
We'll forget about it and move on. That kind of awareness that you're talking about, in my view, will happen the day Kenyans will elect leaders who have that awareness. Because you see, we grapple out here. We are not in the leadership. We are here fighting this fight. And we'll constantly fight it. You'll find architects who will constantly fight it. Today it's Sylvia. Tomorrow there'll be a younger one who will come into my space. Another one will come into my space because they have that kind of consciousness that you're talking about. But the leaders we elect, do they have that consciousness? You know, is it so bad to say that the person, the governor who leads Nairobi, should have some physical planning or, you know, built environment awareness? Is it so wrong for us to say that and declare as Nairobians that this is what our governor should have, you know, or demonstrate that capacity? Because this city needs to function. As you're saying, it needs to function. The population will only increase. And unless we start devolving some functions from Nairobi itself, so that we now extend other capital city functions to go into other cities to allow other cities also to grow, this remains the center. This is the heartbeat of the country. So everyone will want, you know, a lot of Kenyans will want to keep coming to Nairobi, as you can see. Right now, Thika Road is already outdated in terms of volume. You can't handle. Me, I use Mombasa Road. It's been a nightmare. All our lives, Mombasa Road has never been adequate for purpose. It's worse now. The expressway has made people now, build more, move out. But coming into the city is a complete nightmare, you know. So even those, you know, the the benefits that the expressway brought, now we are beginning even to wonder, because to get to the expressway where it starts in Mlolongo is a complete nightmare. So there's, in my view, leadership is so critical. When we are talking about rolling out our Katiba to enhance our physical environment, cleanliness and things like that, if the leader that you are electing does not have that kind of awareness, then how will he prioritize it? His priorities will be in other places. And then we get to miss out on some of these critical areas, and we are all suffering.
You know, you talk about these things because in my neck of the woods, there's an individual who brought up a building, and what they did was to block a drainage. So when the rains came, the road became the drainage, and what that has left is potholes on end. And guess who was supervising that? It was a Kanjo Askari who was there on a daily basis. But this is what we're talking about, because having a structured city or a beautiful city is not only just for show. It is where we live. It is where we raise our children. It is where we go to church. It is places where we go to unwind. You know, in Nairobi today, if you want to go to a park, where do you go to? You have to leave Mlolongo to go to Uhuru Park. Absolutely. Because we do not have these spaces. And amenities have also been overrun by, again, poor leadership that have not protected spaces that our children ought to go play football, you know, where we ought to go swimming, because the leadership has not thought about this. Because the Singapore we talk about today, I was seeing a colleague of mine went to Singapore. From her hotel, she would see in the middle of the CBD. From her hotel, she would go run in a park in the middle of the city and go back to hotel.
Yes.
All that is what makes humanity, makes all of us be sane in an environment where it is fast-paced and continuously moving. But that notwithstanding, as architects now, as individuals who understand the importance of having all these, how do we push this conversation to ensure Mwananchi understands, but that the political class, the leadership there is, understand the importance of having cities that are built for the future that we can also enjoy today?
You know, this thing of leaders, I keep telling my fellow professionals, you guys, we have to roll up our sleeves and get into that space. We should stop joking. We should actually, we owe it to Kenyans to roll up our sleeves and get into that space and not leave it for others who we say we have to now teach them and everything. Last parliament, how much did we talk about mental health? Are there no parliamentarians right now in parliament to speak about mental health? Considering now there's a serious clawback to the, to the strides we had made in the last parliament. Serious clawback on the mental health space. You cannot say they are not aware. But maybe if you had some serious mental health people right now sitting in parliament, they would be now busy putting the government to check. They are the representatives of the people. I say the same. Let's roll up our sleeves. Let's get into these spaces. Let's get our governor, an architect, to be the governor of Nairobi, and why not? Or a planner to be a governor of Nairobi. Why not? He understands. He's in the awareness of what the city needs, to function effectively. We need to roll up our sleeves. And that is really the rallying call. We cannot leave others. Why not? Just because you're professionals doesn't mean we cannot be in this space, go into the political space. We have to be ready to go into the political space. And for those professionals who are already in the in the political space, because we do have some professionals in some of those spaces, they have to remember that the electorate is not just the people who have elected them from where they come from. Even them in their duty as a professional, you have more work to do. You can hold the government to task, not just over the constituents who elected you, but also over the matters of your own career, of your own profession. You can hold the government accountable, and you must. It is your duty. So we have work to do as architects. Whether we are out here in the profession, we have a duty to Kenyans. And we have to have that duty and do it with the diligence and the care that is required of us to protect Kenyans. We must also get into those political spaces, because then we can go and extend our duty by being in the governance space. If we are at all, we are going to realize, our full constitution the way we speak about it. Our constitution is not just the governance we keep talking about, the politics, and the leadership, and of course budgets and everything. There's also the physical space that needs to be realized the way the constitution, promised us. A clean environment, that right to a good, safe structure is part of the constitutional promise. And we as architects are trained to make sure that happens. We are the ones who should be actualizing that part of the Katiba.
Yeah.
So whether we actualize it from outside as professionals, where we are functioning, we have that duty of care to Kenyans. Then we get into those governance spaces and continue with our duty of care while we are in parliament or in our spaces of leadership. I am a very strong believer that professionals, all professionals across, must roll up their sleeves and get into that space. That which we say is murky, is terrible, we need to get in there. And it need not remain murky and terrible. We can get in there, and slowly by slowly we begin to change change the space.
Do you think that, let's just go back to buildings now, do you think that buildings that have been built on lands which they shouldn't be built on should be brought down?
It's a yes and no. There's a lot of analysis that first needs to go there.
So, riparian land, for example. Your
Riparian
previous statement was that riparian land is riparian land, it should not be built on.
Riparian land, especially, like I said, that water that passes through there is not yours only. It belongs to a lot of Kenyans that are downstream. All right? There are circumstances, I think, and the courts have spoken clearly about it. There are circumstances when, yes, maybe a structure may need to be saved, and there are circumstances when there is no conversation. Yes. And it all depends on how the approach is going to be.
Is that approach, does it take into consideration those applicabilities? Or because it seems like what we see is you have an X on the building and they give you a notice. Are they taking into consideration the circumstances under which it would be a yes and the circumstances under which it would be a no? Or does the thing have to come down by order of whomever?
No. There has to be due process. And the courts have been very clear that there has to be due process at any one time. If you've hosted the Nairobi Rivers Commission, people, if you haven't, you need to. Because they will tell you, and this one I know because I engage with them, I know that they have to go through that due process. They have to look at all the circumstances. They have to engage the citizen who's being affected significantly. They have to engage with them. Things like walls, boundary walls, whatnot, temporary structures, those ones are not even up for conversation. The ones that now become very dicey are like now the apartments. But if the thing is causing a damming effect, that is obviously going to flood and create, a disaster and cause harm, then that one is something that has to be seriously discussed with a view to probably bring it down, if it must be brought down. Yes, if it's in a riparian and it must be brought down, then it must be brought down. But you see, all the circumstances must be looked at together with the person who is going to face that injury.
The only way to start your day.